The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace above the Council's central worlds was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Where alien vessels were designed with elegance and ceremony in mind, human warships were built for one purpose only. They were instruments of destruction that made veteran warriors step back in instinctive fear. Captain Tony Mitchell commanded the flagship, Retribution, from a bridge that looked more like a weapons control center than a traditional command deck. Every surface was covered with tactical displays showing firing solutions and target priorities. The ship itself was a mass of armor plating and weapon systems that had been designed during humanity's isolation from galactic affairs. The Council fleet commanders who had been fighting desperately against the Devourers suddenly found themselves facing an even more terrifying sight. Human vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, with weapon systems already charged and targeting computers locked onto every object in the system. The message they broadcast was brief and left no room for misunderstanding. "Stay out of our way." Admiral Caxthor watched from his damaged flagship as human ships moved past the surviving Council forces toward the advancing Devourer fleet. The human vessels moved with mechanical precision that seemed impossible for organic crews. Their formation was so tight that collision seemed inevitable, yet every ship maintained perfect position relative to its neighbors. The first engagement between humans and Devourers lasted exactly 17 minutes. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of human military doctrine that had been perfected during years of isolation. The aliens who had dismissed human tactical abilities were about to receive an education in applied violence. Dr. Carol Stewart coordinated the human scientific response from her laboratory ship positioned safely behind the main battle line. Her teams analyzed Devourer technology in real time using sensors and processing power that exceeded anything the Council possessed. Within minutes of first contact, human scientists had identified critical weaknesses. In ancient machine systems, the Devourers had been designed to fight civilizations that used energy weapons and particle shields. Their adaptive programming could counter most forms of conventional space combat, but human military technology had evolved along different lines during their isolation. Kinetic projectiles fired at relativistic speeds proved devastatingly effective against hull armor designed to deflect energy beams. Colonel Paul Rogers led the first human ground assault against a Devourer landing force that had been processing a Council colony world. His troops moved with coordination and precision that made alien observers question whether humans were actually organic beings. The assault was brutal, efficient, and absolutely merciless. The Devourers had never faced an enemy that fought like humans. Most galactic species viewed warfare as an unfortunate necessity that should be conducted with honor and restraint. Humans approached combat as a problem to be solved using maximum available force applied with surgical precision. Human soldiers did not take prisoners because the Devourers were machines. They did not show mercy because mercy was a concept that had no meaning against mechanical predators. They fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and savage determination that horrified the alien observers, who watched from a safe distance. The second wave of human attacks targeted Devourer command and control systems using tactics that violated several Council conventions on civilized warfare. Human boarding parties used weapons and techniques that were banned by galactic law. They deployed chemical agents that dissolved machine components and electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic systems. Within 6 hours, the Devourer invasion force was in full retreat. Ancient machines that had consumed entire star systems were fleeing from human forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. The mechanical predators had encountered something they were not programmed to handle. They had met an enemy that was more ruthlessly efficient than they were. The human pursuit was relentless. Captain Mitchell's fleet followed the retreating Devourers across 3 star systems, destroying every machine vessel they could catch. Human forces showed no interest in taking prisoners or studying captured technology. Their only goal was the complete elimination of every Devourer unit in the galaxy. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the larger strategic response from her command ship, positioned at the edge of human space. Intelligence reports showed Devourer forces throughout the galaxy beginning to converge on human positions. The ancient machines were finally treating humanity as a serious threat, worthy of their full attention. The convergence played directly into human strategic planning. Rather than fighting scattered battles across dozens of systems, human forces had concentrated the enemy into a single massive engagement. The Battle of Wolf 359 would determine whether the galaxy survived or fell to. Mechanical predators that had slept between the stars, the human fleet that assembled at Wolf 359 represented the full military potential of a species that had been building for war during their isolation. 5,000 vessels armed with weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics, ground forces equipped with technology that seemed almost magical to alien observers, support systems that could maintain combat operations indefinitely without resupply. The Devourers arrived in even greater numbers. Ancient machines that had been dormant for millennia awakened to face a threat they had never encountered before. Planet-sized vessels emerged from dark space accompanied by swarms of smaller units that darkened the stars with their passage. The battle lasted 3 days and changed galactic civilization forever. Human forces fought with a combination of tactical genius and savage determination that exceeded every alien understanding of warfare. They used weapons that violated the laws of physics as most species understood them. They employed strategies that seemed to anticipate enemy responses before the Devourers could implement them. By the end of the first day, half the Devourer force had been destroyed or disabled. By the end of the second day, the ancient machines were struggling to maintain formation against human attacks that seemed to come from impossible directions. By the end of the third day, the threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months was completely eliminated. The final Devourer command vessel was destroyed by a human weapon that turned matter into energy at the molecular level. The explosion could be seen from systems dozens of light years away. When the light faded, nothing remained but empty space and the scattered debris of machines that had once seemed invincible. Council, observers who had watched the battle from safe distances, found themselves looking at human forces with emotions they had never expected to feel: fear, terror, a deep understanding that they had been completely wrong about humanity's true nature. The humans had not fought like other species. They had fought like they had been born for war. Like violence was written into their genetic code at the deepest level. Like they understood destruction in ways that other species could not even imagine. Ambassador Jake Morrison's final transmission to the Council was broadcast from the bridge of a human vessel that had just eliminated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. His words were calm and measured, but they carried an unmistakable message that would be remembered for generations. You now understand what we are capable of when we choose to be. Remember this feeling. Remember that we chose to help you when you did not deserve it, and remember that we can choose differently next time. The transmission ended and the human fleet began its journey back to Earth. Behind them, the survivors of galactic civilization tried to process what they had witnessed. The species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had just saved them from extinction, using military power that exceeded their wildest imagination. In the days that followed, formal apologies began arriving from every member species of the Council. Trade agreements favorable to humanity flooded human space faster than diplomats could process them. Requests for mutual defense treaties arrived hourly from governments that suddenly understood the value of human friendship. But the humans had learned their lesson during the years of isolation. They would engage with the galaxy again, but this time the relationship would be different. This time the aliens would remember what happened when humanity was pushed too far. The Council chamber had been rebuilt after suffering damage during the Devourer crisis. When Ambassador Morrison returned to address the assembled representatives exactly 1 year after walking out, every seat was filled and every voice was silent. When he spoke, the entire galaxy listened with the attention that should have been given years before. The new terms for human participation in galactic affairs were not negotiable. Humanity would be treated as an equal partner in all decisions affecting galactic civilization. Human expertise would be respected and properly compensated. Human military forces would maintain independent command structure while cooperating with Council peacekeeping operations. Most importantly, human withdrawal from galactic civilization remained a permanent option if the terms were violated. The aliens had learned what the galaxy looked like without human cooperation. They had no desire to experience that lesson again. When Ambassador Morrison finished outlining humanity's requirements, not a single voice raised in protest. The first reports came from deep space monitoring stations at the edge of known galaxy. Long-range sensors detected massive objects moving through dark space between star systems. The objects were planet-sized and made of metal that reflected no light. They moved in perfect formation toward inhabited worlds with purpose that seemed almost intelligent. Admiral Caxthor of the Hegemony Fleet was the first military leader to understand what they were facing. His analysts had been studying the sensor data for 3 days before reaching their terrifying conclusion. The objects were not natural phenomena or unknown alien vessels. They were machines that had been sleeping in the void between galaxies for thousands of years. The Devourers had awakened. Ancient records mentioned them in the oldest histories of galactic civilization. They were artificial intelligences that had consumed entire star systems before going dormant for millennia. Most species considered them to be myths or legends from primitive times. The modern galaxy had grown comfortable and safe without understanding that their expansion had finally reached the attention of these sleeping predators. The first attack came without warning. The Outer Rim colony of New Providence simply stopped transmitting one day. Search and rescue ships found only empty space where a thriving world had existed for 50 years. The planet was gone along with its 3 million inhabitants. In its place was a cloud of processed materials and growing numbers of new machine vessels. The Devourers did not negotiate or communicate. They arrived at inhabited systems and began systematically dismantling everything they found. Planets were strip-mined down to their cores. Space stations were consumed and converted into new machine units. Every living being was processed along with every manufactured object until nothing remained but raw materials and expanding fleets of mechanical predators. The Council's military response was immediate but completely inadequate. Fleets that had maintained galactic peace for centuries proved useless against an enemy they did not understand. Traditional tactics failed against machines that felt no fear and could not be reasoned with. Conventional weapons barely scratched the hull. Armor of vessels that had been designed to survive the void between galaxies. General Martha Cole watched the battle reports from her command center on Earth. The alien military forces were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Without human tactical advisors, the Council fleets lacked coordination. Without human engineers, their weapon systems failed at critical moments. Without human medics, their casualty rates were climbing beyond anything seen in modern warfare. The Zephyrian Home Fleet was the first major force to engage the Devourers directly. 50,000 vessels strong and equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, they should have been able to stop any conventional threat. Against the ancient machines, they lasted less than 6 hours before being completely destroyed. Admiral Felthan commanded the Home Fleet from his flagship when the battle began. His tactical displays showed Devourer vessels that moved with mechanical precision through formations designed to maximize traditional firepower. The enemy ships seemed to know exactly how Council forces would respond to each situation. The battle was a disaster from the first exchange of weapons fire. Zephyrian plasma cannons that could destroy asteroids barely scorched the hulls of enemy vessels. Devourer return fire consisted of energy beams that cut through Council shields like they were made of paper. Within minutes, half the Home Fleet was either destroyed or disabled. Admiral Felthan tried every tactical maneuver he had learned in 40 years of military service. Nothing worked against an enemy that responded to each move with perfect counters. The Devourers fought like they had studied galactic military doctrine for centuries and prepared specifically to defeat it. The end came when Devourer boarding pods penetrated the flagship's defenses. The mechanical invaders moved through the ship, converting crew members and equipment into raw materials for their expansion. Admiral Felthan's last transmission was a desperate plea for any force in the galaxy to avenge his people. The fall of the Zephyrian Home Fleet sent shockwaves through every military organization in known space. The Council's most powerful combat force had been eliminated in less than a day. If the Devourers could destroy 50,000 warships, that easily then no conventional defense would be sufficient to stop them. Panic began spreading through civilian populations as news of the defeats reached inhabited worlds. Evacuation ships fled from systems near the advancing machine fleets. Stock markets collapsed as investors realized that galactic civilization might not survive the crisis. Governments that had seemed stable for centuries began experiencing riots and political upheaval. The Hegemony's Grand Fleet lasted slightly longer than the Zephyrians, but the result was the same. 200,000 vessels supported by orbital defense platforms and asteroid fortresses could not hold the line against enemies that seemed to know exactly how to defeat every defensive strategy. The ancient machines pushed deeper into council space, consuming everything in their path. The breaking point came when the Devourers reached the Zephyrian homeworld. 3 billion beings lived on the planet that had been the center of Zephyrian civilization for thousands of years. The world was defended by planetary shields, orbital weapons, and the last reserves of the Zephyrian military. The defense lasted 18 hours. Devourer machines landed on the planet's surface and began converting the entire world into raw materials. Cities that had stood for millennia were dismantled piece by piece. The population was processed along with every building, vehicle, and manufactured object until nothing remained but empty space and growing swarms of mechanical predators. Speaker Vexthul watched the destruction from his command ship in a nearby system. The being who had insulted humanity countless times now faced the complete extinction of galactic civilization. His proud species was being erased from existence by enemies that cared nothing for politics or negotiations. The final transmission from Zephyrian homeworld was broadcast across the galaxy. It was a simple message that carried the weight of absolute defeat. The transmission lasted only seconds before being cut off as the last communication satellite was consumed by the advancing machines. In desperation, Speaker Vexthul authorized a direct communication to human space. The message was transmitted on all frequencies with maximum priority encoding. For the first time in his long life, the arrogant hegemony leader was begging for help from beings he had considered inferior. The message was simple and direct. We were wrong. Please help us. The transmission reached human monitoring stations within hours. It was recorded and analyzed by intelligence services that had been tracking the Devourer advance since the first attacks began. Human military leaders gathered in secure facilities to debate their response to the crisis. For 72 hours, the debate continued in the halls of human government. The aliens had driven humanity out of galactic civilization with insults and demands for submission. Now those same aliens were facing extinction and begging for human intervention. Some argued that humanity should let the galaxy burn. The aliens had made their position clear during that final council session. They considered humans to be inferior beings who should serve as client species under alien protection. Perhaps it was time for them to face the consequences of that arrogance. Others pointed out that the Devourers would not stop with council space. If they consumed the entire galaxy, then humanity would eventually face the same mechanical predators. Better to fight them while alien forces could still provide support than to face them alone after every other species had been destroyed. The debate continued. As reports arrived showing the Devourers were now only 6 systems away from the Council's central worlds. If they were not stopped soon, then trillions of beings would die, and galactic civilization would be completely destroyed. The ancient machines would then turn their attention to human space with resources gathered from consuming hundreds of worlds. President Henry Walker made the final decision that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. The choice was based on calculation rather than emotion. Human survival required a galaxy with other intelligent species. Allowing the Devourers to consume everything would leave humanity alone in a universe of mechanical predators. The order went out to every human military facility in known space. Operation Redemption was authorized. The human fleets would return to galactic space not as allies or partners, but as the galaxy's only hope for survival. The aliens would finally see what humans were capable of when they chose to unleash their full potential. Admiral Katie Sullivan received her orders and began preparing the largest human military operation in history. The fleets that emerged from human space would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The aliens were about to learn why humans had been so carefully restrained during their years of cooperation. The time for restraint was over. The first major disaster happened at the Nexus trade station in the Outer Rim. The massive space station served as a hub for commerce between 12 different star systems. Over 50,000 beings lived and worked there at any given time. The station was old but well-maintained thanks to regular human technical support. Chief Engineer Rick Adams had spent countless hours keeping Nexus operational. He had worked 36-hour shifts during emergencies. His team had upgraded critical systems and trained alien technicians in human maintenance procedures. The station management had always treated human engineers as expensive contractors rather than essential partners. Now the main power grid was failing and Rick was nowhere to be found. The station's alien technical staff tried to follow human written procedures, but many of the documents were too complex for non-human understanding. Critical systems required human intuition and experience that could not be easily transferred to other species. The power failure started small. A single relay station went offline during routine maintenance. The backup system should have automatically compensated, but someone had programmed them incorrectly. Instead of balancing the load, the backup systems began overloading other parts of the grid. Warning alarms filled the station as power fluctuations spread throughout the habitat sections. Life support systems began switching to emergency mode. The oxygen recycling plants started shutting down to protect themselves from power surges. In the residential areas, families gathered their emergency supplies and waited for official announcements. Station Commander Yelthar was a crystalline collective leader with 40 years of experience. He had managed 3 different space stations and earned respect throughout the galaxy, but he had always relied on human technical expertise to handle major emergencies. Without that support, he found himself making decisions about systems he did not fully understand. The repair teams were working as fast as they could, but human engineering was more complex than anyone had realized. Human technical manuals assumed knowledge that other species did not possess. Human safety procedures were written for human psychology and did not translate well to alien thinking patterns. Hours passed as the situation grew worse. The main oxygen recycling plant shut down completely. Emergency reserves would last 18 hours at most. The station's food production areas lost power and began experiencing equipment failures. The docking bays could not safely receive ships because the navigation systems were unreliable. Commander Yelthar finally authorized an emergency transmission to human space. The message was broadcast on all frequencies with maximum priority coding. He explained the situation and begged for immediate human assistance. 3,000 beings would die if the life support systems could not be restored. The transmission reached human monitoring stations within minutes. It was logged, recorded, and filed away without any response. Human space remained completely silent as the crisis at Nexus Station continued to worsen. The alien repair teams worked for 18 straight hours before finally restoring partial power to the life support systems. By that time, 200 beings had died from oxygen deprivation. The station's hospital was overwhelmed with cases of respiratory distress and panic-related injuries. The economic damage was enormous as shipping companies canceled contracts and moved their operations to more reliable facilities. Rick Adams received a personal copy of Commander Yelthar's emergency transmission 3 days after the crisis ended. He read about the deaths and injuries with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The people at Nexus Station had treated him and his team like replaceable contractors for years. Now they understood what human expertise was actually worth. The second major crisis hit the Kepler Mining Consortium within weeks of the Nexus disaster. Human mining experts had revolutionized asteroid and planetary extraction throughout the galaxy. Their techniques increased efficiency while maintaining strict environmental protection standards. The consortium had made enormous profits using human methods while treating human advisors as temporary consultants. Dr. Rachel Foster had been the head of human geological surveys for the consortium. She had developed extraction techniques that could harvest valuable minerals without destroying planetary ecosystems. Her methods had been copied and used on dozens of worlds throughout consortium space. Now those same worlds were experiencing environmental disasters as alien miners tried to maintain production without human oversight. The mining techniques worked well when followed exactly, but required constant adjustment based on local conditions. Human expertise was essential for preventing ecological damage during the extraction process. The planet Kethmore was experiencing the worst problems. The world was home to 8 million aliens who depended on mining income for their survival. Consortium operations there had been using human-designed extraction methods for 5 years with excellent results. The mines were profitable, and the environment remained healthy. Without human supervision, the mining operations began cutting corners to maintain production quotas. Safety protocols were simplified or ignored entirely. Environmental monitoring systems were shut down to save money. The extraction equipment was pushed beyond safe operating limits to increase output. The first signs of trouble appeared as strange chemical smells in the air around mining sites. Local water supplies began showing traces of toxic compounds that had never been detected before. Native wildlife started dying in large numbers near the extraction zones. The planet's atmosphere began showing signs of industrial pollution that human methods had previously prevented. Syndicate leader Quintal watched the disaster unfold with growing desperation. His people were making the same mining profits as before, but the environmental cost was becoming catastrophic. At the current rate of ecological damage, Kethmore would be uninhabitable within 2 years. He sent a personal message to Dr. Foster, begging her to return just long enough to fix the environmental problems. He offered massive payment and promised better treatment for human advisors in the future. He attached detailed images of the ecological damage and pleaded with her to help save his homeworld. Rachel read the message and looked at the attached images for a long time. She could see exactly what was going wrong and knew how to fix it. The solutions were not complex but required human understanding of ecological balance that alien miners did not possess. She could save Kethmore and its 8 million inhabitants. With a few weeks of work, her reply was a single word that carried the weight of years of mistreatment and dismissal. No, the economic impact of these disasters was spreading throughout the galaxy, faster than anyone had expected. The Galactic Stock Exchange reported massive losses as confidence in critical infrastructure collapsed. Insurance companies stopped covering operations that had previously been considered completely safe. Shipping costs increased as companies avoided systems with unreliable facilities. The Council was forced to hold emergency sessions as reports of failures poured in from across known space. The Zephyrian Trade Authority reported a 60% drop in profits over 6 months. The Crystal Collective was rationing medical supplies for the first time in decades. Even the powerful hegemony was experiencing supply shortages that threatened their military readiness. Speaker Vexthul stood before the assembled council and tried to maintain order as accusations flew between different species. The Zephyrians blamed the hegemony for driving away the humans with their arrogant demands. The Crystal Collective accused everyone of short-sighted thinking that had destroyed galactic stability. Smaller species demanded compensation for losses they could not afford to absorb. The debate continued for hours, but produced no solutions. The fundamental problem was that galactic civilization had become dependent on human expertise without realizing it. Human cooperation had not been a generous gift that could be easily replaced. It had been the foundation that supported the entire system of interspecies commerce and cooperation. Intelligence reports from human space showed massive construction projects and increased industrial activity. The humans were not waiting around hoping for alien forgiveness. They were building an independent economy that could function without any alien involvement. Human colonies were being expanded and new settlements were being established in previously unexplored systems. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that human eagerness to help had not been a sign of weakness or desperation for acceptance. It had been the careful work of a species that understood how to build and maintain complex systems. Now that work had stopped and the systems were falling apart. Council sessions grew longer and more heated as the crisis deepened. Traditional allies were turning against each other as economic pressures mounted. Ancient agreements were being questioned as species struggled to adapt to life without human support. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for centuries was beginning to crack, but the humans remained silent. They had withdrawn completely from galactic affairs and showed no interest in returning. The civilization that had dismissed them as primitive newcomers was learning what happened when the most competent species in the galaxy decided to stop cooperating. The cracks in the foundation were spreading, and no one knew how to stop them. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the council chambers. At first, the alien races thought it was just a dramatic gesture. They expected human ships to return within days with apologies and requests to resume normal relations. They were completely wrong. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the cargo ship New Horizon and ignored another incoming transmission. The communication panel showed 17 missed calls from various alien governments. The Zephyrian Trade Authority wanted to discuss shipping contracts. The Crystal Collective was asking about delayed medical supplies. The Void speakers were demanding explanations for canceled research agreements. Elena deleted each message without listening. Her cargo holds were empty now. For 3 years she had carried human-made medicines across the galaxy. Her ship had delivered advanced technology to dozens of worlds. Now she was heading home to Earth with nothing but empty space in her storage bays. The aliens had not realized how much they depended on human efficiency. Human ships were always on time. Human communications were always answered quickly. Human trade agreements were honored exactly as written. The galaxy had grown used to this reliability without understanding its value. Now that reliability was gone. Human merchant vessels had simply stopped coming to alien ports. Human cargo ships ignored all requests for service. Human passenger transports canceled their routes through alien space. The sudden absence was creating problems that got worse every day. Dr. Alex Thompson sat in his laboratory on Luna Station and watched years of research disappear. His computer screen showed file deletion progress bars slowly emptying entire databases. Medical research that could save millions of lives was being erased piece by piece. For 3 years, Alex had freely shared human medical discoveries with the Galactic Medical Consortium. Human doctors had developed cures for 17 different alien diseases. Human scientists had created treatment protocols that reduced mortality rates across dozens of species. Human medical technology had made surgeries possible that were previously impossible. All of that knowledge was now being removed from alien access. The consortium kept sending desperate messages asking for clarification. They wanted to know if the file deletions were some kind of technical error. They offered to pay for continued access to human medical databases. They promised better cooperation in future research projects. Alex deleted their messages just like he was deleting their access to human knowledge. The aliens had taken human medical gifts for granted. They had treated human doctors like servants whose only purpose was to solve alien health problems. Now they would have to solve those problems themselves. The military situation was even worse. Admiral Katie Sullivan had quietly recalled every human ship from joint operations with alien fleets. Human vessels had provided critical support for galactic peacekeeping missions. Human crews had excellent training and advanced equipment that made them valuable allies in any conflict. The withdrawal happened so smoothly that many alien commanders did not notice at first. Human ships simply failed to arrive for scheduled patrols. Human officers sent polite messages about scheduling conflicts and communication failures. Human military bases reported technical difficulties that prevented deployment. By the time alien leaders realized what was happening, it was too late to stop the cascade of problems. Border patrols that had been running smoothly for years suddenly became inefficient and dangerous. Joint training exercises had to be canceled when human participants failed to show up. Military research projects ground to a halt without human technical expertise. The economic impact was starting to spread throughout the galaxy. The Nexus Trading Hub reported a 40% drop in cargo throughput. The Kepler Mining Consortium saw production fall to levels not seen in decades. The Outer Rim colonies were experiencing supply shortages that threatened their survival. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in his office on Earth and read reports from human agents throughout the galaxy. The news was exactly what he had expected. Alien governments were beginning to understand the true cost of losing human cooperation. His desk was covered with increasingly desperate messages from species that had insulted humanity for years. The Zephyrian High Command wanted to negotiate new shipping agreements. The Crystal Collective was offering massive payments for continued medical cooperation. Even the proud hegemony had sent subtle inquiries about resuming diplomatic contact. Jake deleted each message after reading only the first few lines. The aliens had made their position clear during that final council session. They considered humans to be inferior beings who should serve as client species under alien protection. Now they could live with the consequences of that decision. The human withdrawal was not just about trade and military cooperation. Human cultural exchanges had stopped as well. Alien students who had been studying at human universities found their programs canceled. Human artists who had been sharing their work across the galaxy recalled their pieces from alien museums. Human musicians stopped performing at interspecies festivals that had been popular for years. The galaxy was discovering that humans had been involved in almost every aspect of interspecies civilization. Their sudden absence created gaps that other species could not easily fill. Alien leaders were beginning to realize that human eagerness to help had not been a sign of weakness or desperation. It had been the foundation that held galactic society together. Dr. Rachel Foster received a personal message from syndicate leader Quintal of the mining consortium. The message was different from the usual formal communications between species. Quintal was begging Rachel to return just long enough to prevent an ecological disaster on his homeworld. The consortium had been using human-developed mining techniques for years. These methods increased efficiency by 400%, while protecting local environments. Without human expertise, the consortium was struggling to maintain production without causing massive environmental damage. Rachel looked at images of Quintal's homeworld attached to his message. The mining operations were already showing signs of ecological collapse. Toxic runoff was poisoning rivers. Strip mining was destroying forests. The atmosphere was becoming polluted with industrial chemicals. Her response was a single word that took her 30 minutes to write. She typed it, deleted it, typed it again, and finally sent it without any additional explanation. The word was simple and final. Numbered council sessions were becoming increasingly heated as economic reports showed the true scope of the crisis. Trade routes that had been profitable for decades were now losing money. Technology development had slowed to a crawl without human innovation. Previously stable systems were showing signs of political and economic stress. The Zephyrians blamed the hegemony for driving away the humans. The Crystal Collective accused everyone of short-sighted thinking. The Void Speakers suggested that the crisis was temporary and would resolve itself once the humans realized their mistake. But the humans were not coming back. Intelligence reports from human space showed increased military construction and expanded industrial capacity. The humans were not sitting around waiting for alien forgiveness. They were building something new, and they were doing it without any alien involvement. Speaker Vexthul stood before the council and tried to maintain his authority. He insisted that the human withdrawal was a temporary emotional response that would end once human leaders came to their senses. He suggested sending a delegation to Earth to negotiate a return to normal relations. The suggestion was voted down by species who had already tried to contact human leadership. Every message sent to human space was either ignored or returned with simple statements that humans were no longer interested in galactic affairs. The isolation was complete and showed no signs of ending. As the months passed, it became clear that the galaxy was facing its first major crisis since the formation of the Council. The system that had maintained peace and prosperity for centuries was breaking down without human participation. The aliens were finally beginning to understand what they had lost when they drove humanity away. But understanding the problem and solving it were two very different things. The humans had made their choice and they were sticking to it. The galaxy would have to learn to function without them, or find a way to earn back their cooperation. Neither option looked easy or quick. The silence from human space was becoming deafening. Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched the aliens argue about trade routes. The Galactic Council chamber was huge and filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of crystal that glowed in the dark. A few were just floating balls of energy that spoke through machines. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 3 years now. Every single time it was the same story. The older alien races would talk and make decisions. The humans would try to speak. The aliens would ignore them or tell them to be quiet. Today was no different. The Zephyrians were complaining about shipping costs. They looked like tall birds with 4 arms and spoke in high-pitched voices that hurt human ears. Their leader was making grand gestures with all 4 hands while talking about how his people deserved better trade deals. Next to Jake sat Lisa Parker and Ben Carter. Lisa was the head of Human Science Division. She had tried to share human medical discoveries with the galaxy for years. Most aliens just took her research and never said thank you. Ben ran the Human Military Liaison Office. The aliens loved to use human soldiers for dangerous missions, but never invited humans to planning meetings. Lisa leaned over and whispered to Jake. Her voice was tired. She had bags under her eyes from staying up late working on reports that no one would read. Ben looked angry. His jaw was tight and his hands were closed into fists. All 3 humans were getting sick of being treated like children. The current speaker was Counselor Mordek from the Hegemony. The Hegemony controlled half the galaxy and thought they were better than everyone else. Mordek looked like a giant slug covered in armor. When he spoke, his voice was deep and made the floor shake. Mordek was talking about the new trade routes through the Kepler system. Human ships had found those routes. Human explorers had mapped the safe paths through the asteroid fields. Human engineers had built the navigation beacons that made travel possible. But now Mordek was explaining why humans should not be allowed to use their own discovery. Jake felt his anger growing. 3 years of this treatment was enough. He had been a diplomat on Earth before joining the galactic community. He knew how to stay calm and professional, but watching his people get insulted every day was wearing him down. Speaker Vexthul of the hegemony stood up next. Vexthul was even worse than Mordek. He was tall and thin with gray skin and 6 eyes. He always spoke like he was teaching children. His voice was slow and full of fake kindness that made humans want to punch something. Vexthul began talking about how newer species needed to learn their place. He said young races should watch and listen instead of trying to participate. He used words like guidance and mentorship, but everyone knew he meant control and submission. Jake stood up. The movement was sudden and several aliens turned to look at him. In the human section, all eyes were on their chief ambassador. Jake cleared his throat and raised his hand to speak. This was the proper way to address the council according to their rules. Vexthul saw Jake but pretended not to notice. He kept talking about trade quotas and shipping schedules. Jake remained standing. The human gesture for requesting to speak was supposed to be recognized within 30 seconds according to council law. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Jake was still standing with his hand raised. Other ambassadors began to notice. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed amused by the situation. Vexthul continued his speech as if nothing was happening. Finally, Jake spoke without permission. His voice carried across the huge chamber. He talked about human contributions to galactic society. He mentioned the medical breakthroughs Lisa had shared freely. He reminded everyone about human military service in border conflicts. He listed the trade benefits that human efficiency had brought to dozens of worlds. Vexthul stopped talking and looked at Jake with all 6 eyes. The look was cold and full of disgust. When he spoke, his voice had lost all fake kindness. He told Jake that newer species should observe and learn, not speak. He said humans were too young to understand complex galactic politics. The chamber went quiet. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. Around him, other humans were getting angry. Lisa was shaking her head. Ben looked ready to start a fight. In the alien section, some creatures were making sounds that might have been laughter. Then Mordek spoke again. His suggestion hit the humans like a physical blow. He said that humans would be better suited as a client species under hegemony protection. Client species were not independent. They had no votes and no rights. They existed to serve their protectors. The words hung in the air like poison. 3 years of insults and dismissals had led to this moment. The galaxy was officially telling humanity to give up their freedom and become servants. Jake looked at Lisa and Ben. Both were staring at him with the same expression. They were done. All 3 humans began gathering their papers and data tablets. The movements were slow and deliberate. Jake closed his briefcase with a soft click that seemed loud in the quiet chamber. Other ambassadors were starting to realize something was happening. Conversations stopped as aliens watched the human delegation prepare to leave. Some looked confused. Others seemed worried. A few still appeared amused by what they thought was a childish tantrum. Jake stood and walked toward the exit. Lisa and Ben followed close behind. Their footsteps echoed in the huge chamber. Every alien eye was watching them now. The silence was complete and heavy. At the massive doors that led out of the chamber, Jake stopped. He turned around one last time to face the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. His voice was calm and clear when he spoke. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of finality. When you need us, do not call. The doors closed behind the humans with a sound like thunder. In the chamber behind them, the silence continued for several long minutes. Then slowly, the aliens began to talk again. Most seemed to think the humans would be back tomorrow with apologies and requests to rejoin the discussions. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about many things when it came to humans, but they would learn the truth soon enough. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you pushed the most dangerous species in existence too far. The human delegation walked to their ship in complete silence. Behind them, the council continued their meeting as if nothing important had happened. They would regret that decision for the rest of their lives.